Good morning. My name is Mike Stoehr, and it is my honor to be the third of three members of our church to speak regarding the Stewardship program, which ends in 1 week. 2 weeks ago, the Reverend Dick Jones, our pastor for many years, shared with us how important it is for a church to have a budget and financial issues under control when there is a change in ministry leadership. We saw the picture of Gary this morning on the tape. That will be experienced by us in a couple of months. That is a wise perspective from a successful head minister and something our church should not treat lightly. Last week, Jenny Fisher reminded us how important it is for a church to provide programs for the young children for their growth and nurture. Programs they likely won't get at a school, guidance they may or may not get from their families, their homes, or their friends. Another wise perspective for all parents concerned about their children's spiritual growth. Many of you may have seen the Noah's Ark presentation last week, put on by many children in our church. Who knows the ultimate effect that may have on their lives of those participants, both youth and the adults. But my comments this morning will focus on financing a church when it seems like many others have more capacity for doing so. Inflation is high, money is. There are many needs that need to be addressed, and our money is already stretched. But here is where I'd like to get personal. Susan and I moved to Milwaukee and joined this church in 1980. 43 years ago. Our oldest son, Jonathan, was a teenager who didn't want to come with us to church and instead stayed home despite all our urgings and requests. Each Sunday was a confrontation, and we weren't winning. Then Susan found out about the annual summer excursion the youth take our church on. And the upcoming summer trip was scheduled for Mexico. When she told Jonathan about that, it seemed to inspire him. A time away from parents to an exotic place where he could speak Spanish with other kids his age and something new and different. He agreed to go. Met new friends, and candidly, it changed his life. I want to repeat that. It changed his life. All because this church offered the chance to do so. Could that have been God's hand at work in our church? Example number 2. I joined a men's prayer group that met each week, introducing me to other men in our church who provided guidance and prayers. Shortly after moving here, the circumstances of the job didn't work out very well, and Susan and I found myself unemployed with a Whitefish Bay mortgage, 4 children, and no income. Times were tough. After church one day, Stan Kakofka, a long-term member of this church that I'd gotten to know, asked me how things were going. Well, I was humbled enough to be honest with him. I shared that I needed work. Our finances were drained, and I was a bit discouraged. Stan told me that moment that he was a consultant. He had more work that he could handle, and asked if I would be interested in helping him out. I was. More out of a need than long-term career interests. He then suggested we get together and work out a plan. When Susan and I arrived home from church that day, there was an envelope stuck in our door with a $2,000 check from Stan as an upfront payment for work we would soon be doing together. Two of the major needs of our family were now being met. Could that have been God's hand at work through our church with the men's group as well? Example number 3. Susan received a call from Dick Jones one day asking if she could come in for a brief chat. The purpose of the chat was that Dick shared he had information that our youngest child had marijuana in the car when he was with some of the other friends. We were completely unaware of this. But thanks to Reverend Jones, we now had information that we were otherwise oblivious to. Could this have been God's hand at work in our church membership lives once again? I've shared just 3 personal events that, due to our church, have affected our family. And each of you may have similar events in your lives. I believe there had to be another force, perhaps God at work in our lives through this church. And there is a Bible passage that I believe applies to all of us in the pews and those of you watching from home. It's known as the parable of the tenants, Matthew 25:14-18. In the interest of time, I will paraphrase, starting at verse 14. It will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to their ability. The man who had received the 5 talents put his money to work and gave 5 more. So also the one who had gotten 2 talents, he gained 2 more. But the one who had received 1 talent buried it and hid the money. When the master returned, he learned that the 5-talent person had doubled his talents, and the master was so pleased he was put in charge of many things. The same with the 2-talent person, who was rewarded with 2 more talents and put in charge of several more things. The 1-talent person who did nothing with their talent was reprimanded by his master, and his talent given to the one with 5 original talents. This story applies to our church and each of us. Watching from home, those of you in the pews, you, Susan, and I. Our church is filled with 5 talented people, both in terms of resources and volunteer gifts. I ask, do you want to have your contribution richly blessed? Then I challenge each of us to find a better place to double our reward than this church. When you fill out the pledge card you will receive this week, please commit to giving as if you want to be generously rewarded. Because in God's mysterious way, He will use this church to see that that happens. I don't know how it will happen in each of our lives, but then I've already said that God works in mysterious ways. Make your pledge a 5-talent pledge that stretches your faith and allows this church to bless your lives and the lives of others abundantly in ways we never expected or thought possible. The choice is ours.